Couple of brief housekeeping details, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill. I will then disappear to go do a Skywarn net, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes. The weather must be taken care of. So I thank all of you for coming. And on your tables is a sort of list of activities with the time, in case anybody wants to know how things are. I'm very compulsive that way, so I wrote this all out.
I don't.
So they'll start serving sometime around 7 or maybe a little before. And then after the buffet, we'll have the dessert. We'll have awards and some comments from Bill, the president, and myself. And then we'll have a presentation from James, AB1DQ.
Wait, what? I'm presenting tonight?
You are presenting. The first year we had this, I think 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I guess. We had Tom Gallagher presenting, and I was told that some people thought it was too dry, so we needed to make it wetter. So last year we had Marie Bouffard talking about what happened during the hurricanes in Puerto Rico. So this year we have James going to be talking about the amateur radio and popular culture, which is amateur radio and books and movies and TV and things that I think everyone, even if you're not interested in amateur radio, would enjoy seeing. He's a very entertaining presenter. So we think you'll have an enjoyable evening. Thank you very much for coming. It's been a great year. We're looking forward to other years coming up with lots of good activities. And with that, I will turn it over to Bill, W1KKF, our president.
Thank you, Ed. Well, what a wonderful bunch of smiling faces. This is really great. Happy Christmas, everybody. Why don't we introduce ourselves so that everybody knows who's here? I'm Bill, W1KKF.
My list of presentation is not considered to be complete by any stretch of the imagination. So you guys may have some shows or movies or things that you feel should have been included. If not, you can share, and we can all learn together. So let me start the presentation, and we'll go from there.
Can everybody see? Do we need to dim the lights?
So that opening song, I don't know how good the audio is going to be for everybody, but that was from the B-52's Planet Claire, which featured some CW in the opening part of the song. And that's just one example of where we're going from. So we're going to start. The presentation is going to be in 3 parts tonight. The first part is going to be television and film. The second part will be ham radio and print in the pop culture. And the last part will be a gallery of some celebrity ham radio operators. So, starting off with, I honestly did rehearse this, television and film. So the 1930s into the 1940s was considered to be a golden age of Hollywood, and it was also, as you know, an era when ham radio really became popular. So it's no wonder that we had an overlap there. The first film that I'm highlighting is the 1938 picture called Love Finds Andy Hardy, which featured Andy Rooney. In this movie, Andy Hardy's ailing grandmother lives in a remote section of Canada where there's no telephones. Andy's friend Jimmy is a ham radio operator, and he works at a Canadian station to relay the news of his grandmother's health. The two hams will later exchange QSL cards, and many QSL cards are seen in the movie in Andy's shack. And in the following year, MGM produced a short film called Radio Hams. And this was a 10-minute featurette in which a family using a homemade shortwave radio listened to ham radio operators and hear these stories that are unfolding of excitement, rescues, and such at sea. Now, 49th Parallel came out in 1942. And this is a film that dealt with a Nazi U-boat that was shot down off the Canadian coast, and I guess 6 or 7 crew members had to get away to safety. So ham radio was featured a lot in this. You'll notice these stills from the movie show radios in them. And then there was this 1956 French film, C'est tous les gars du monde, If All the Guys in the World. This was a French film released in '56 that was devoted largely to the art of amateur radio. Jean-Louis, a young Parisian ham, receives an SOS message from the high seas and works to prevent a major catastrophe with the help of his fellow hams. So just as ham radio was popular in the 1930s when cinema was in its golden age, ham radio also became a popular topic in the 1950s when television became popular. So everybody knows The Twilight Zone, and they had several episodes that actually featured ham radio. I have a clip here from a season 5 episode called The Black Leather Jackets. This features Denver Pyle as Stu Tilleman. This first aired in January 1964. I'm hoping you can hear the audio okay. Stu and his wife discover a strange antenna on their neighbor's house and become quite concerned.
Martha, come here a moment. That wasn't there this morning, was it?
No. The Andersons took their antenna with them when they moved.
It's a star of luck.
What?
Ham radio operators, you know what they do to radio and television reception.
Daddy,
Yeah.
I don't know what's the matter, but I was listening to my radio while I was studying, and all of a sudden it began picking up these weird voices.
Ham radio operators.
Oh, is there anything we can do about it? Or we just have to live with it?
Well, there's one thing we can do. We can make sure they've got a license to operate.
Oh, well, do you think you should, too? I mean, those men seem so kind of threatening somehow.
Yes, ham radio operators seem threatening somehow. So going on from there, hold on one second. Advance the slide. So next we go over to 1313 Mockingbird Drive. Does anybody remember this episode? So, the Munsters, Herman Munster actually had a ham shack in one episode, and he had a call sign W6XRL4, and here's a clip from that episode from 1965.
I've always wanted a ham radio set, and now that I've got one, I'm going to listen in on distress signals and notify the authorities and prevent disasters, noble things like that. Calling CQ, calling CQ. Come in, please.
Not much luck there for Herman. Anyways, it looks like he had largely homebrew equipment in his shack. So a couple other TV shows in the 70s featured ham radio in episodes. In MASH 1974, you may remember Klinger got married by ham radio to his sweetheart back home in Toledo. Then there was an episode of The Waltons in 1977. It was a Christmas episode called The Children's Carol. And the Baldwin sisters were fostering a couple of English children who were separated from their parents during the war. And Jim Bob on Christmas morning talks to his shortwave radio friends to put the children in touch with their mother back home in England. And then the 1980s Alf, everyone remembers Alf, right? So in the pilot episode of Alf was this alien life form, Alf. His name was Gordon Shumway, actually. He was tracking a ham radio signal from the Tanner's garage and ended up crashing into it. Throughout the episodes, throughout the seasons that ran for 4 years, ham radio was often or occasionally seen in the background. So. So Matt Groening's Simpsons, the longest running sitcom on TV now, actually often lampooned ham radio. In season 1, episode 11, the Crepes of Wrath, Bart gets sent to Albania as an exchange student, and the Albanian kid who comes to live with the Simpsons is a spy and keeps sending details of Homer's nuclear reactors via ham radio back home. In episode 13 of season 4, Selma's Choice, we learn that Marge's sister Selma is a ham radio operator. She decides she wants to have a baby only because she has a lot of love to give, and her only outlet is ham radio. Season 8, episode 12, Mountains of Madness, Mr. Burns decides to use his telegraph set to send an SOS message, but the signal is only received at a telegraph machine stored in a Samuel B. Morse Museum exhibit. In season 11, Missionary Impossible, Homer finds himself getting shipped off to the South Pacific Islands to do missionary work, and the Reverend Lovejoy provides him with a ham radio to communicate with Marge and the kids back home. And then in season 17, episode 10, Homer's paternity coot, we learn that Principal Skinner is also a ham radio operator. He's using the call sign AB1DQ as his call sign. This was the call sign of the show's executive producer, David Merkin. That call sign expired in 1998. We have a clip from that one.
This is WA3QIZ. Do you read me?
Seymour, isn't it about time you made a real friend?
Mother, please. I'm communicating with my fellow hams.
How do I talk? Push this button here. You're all losers!
Again, more grief for our scam radio operators. Not to be outdone on Sunday nights.
It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
But where are those good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely?
So, Seth MacFarlane's Family Guy has also been lampooning ham radio operators since they first went on the air. In season 3, a very special Family Guy Freaking Christmas, Peter Griffin goes Christmas shopping at the local mall. He stops to watch TV through the window of a ham radio store. What's pretty cool about this is if you look at the year that the store was established, it was 1934, the actual year of the FCC Communications Act. So that's kind of cool. A nice little homage there that maybe only a nerd would appreciate. Season 8, Quagmire's Baby. Peter is playing with the ham radio in a couple of different scenes. It's kind of a side story. And this is my probably favorite clip tonight. It's from season 12, The Old Man and the Big C. Glenn Quagmire, Peter's neighbor, accidentally loses his toupee, and his new appearance changes him into an old man. And we discover in this episode he too is a ham radio operator.
Hey, slow down. Drive like hell and you'll get there. Wait, man, what the hell are you doing? I'm just letting all these hot rodders know that this is a neighborhood, not a speedway track. Too fast, too fast! Our children should not have to live in fear!
Okay, well, how come you're not doing this in front of your own house?
My ham radio interferes with the radar gun. Talked to a fella in Papua New Guinea last night. You should come by sometime and join in the fun.
Hello?
Hello?
Are you bald?
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a compliment either for your radio operators. We're going to go back to the theater now. So in the 1980s into the 90s, actually from the 90s right up to today, ham radio actually had a resurgence in theater. Just a few quick movies to mention that you may not have been aware of. A Perfect World from 1993. A Texas Ranger played by Clint Eastwood uses the Texas governor's state-of-the-art mobile communications command center to help capture an escaped convict. Then, of course, most people remember Independence Day from 1996. When an alien invasion happened, the military and civilians and scientists used ham radio and radio communications equipment, including Morse code, to help fight the alien invaders. I'm back. There you go. Phenomenon, which starred John Travolta. Forrest Whitaker played the main character's friend, and he portrayed Nate Pope, and he had this amateur call sign WB6QLF. And of course, this is. And of course, Contact is my favorite, based on the Carl Sagan novel, starring my heartthrob, Jodie Foster, I'm actually allowed to, well, never mind. My wife would make that an acceptable cheat, but of course it's not going to work out for a few reasons. But anyways,
Good choice there, Jim.
I'm so sorry. Stick to the script, right, Ed? So anyways, Contact. This was an absolutely great movie. It was a really beautiful movie based on the Carl Sagan novel. It starred Jodie Foster, and her character as a young girl actually is operating her dad's ham radio station. And then the one everybody talks about, of course, is Frequency. And if you go to Boxborough, they seem to always be playing this on Friday nights at Boxborough. And in this story, a New York City firefighter, through a strange atmospheric occurrence, is able to communicate actually with his dad across the decades. So we have a clip from that.
John, hey Jules, there's somebody I want you to talk to, okay? Remember I told you about this guy, John? I want you to say hello to him.
John,
Yeah.
say hello to my wife, Julia.
Hi.
Hi, John. Expect something your call?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, my 6-year-old keeps telling us he wants to be a policeman. Right
So
after
that's
he
John as
retires
a
from the
6-year-old
Navy.
there talking through time.
We just bought him a badge and a whistle for his birthday.
Yeah, I remember. I used to play cops and robbers all the time. And my mom wouldn't let me have a toy gun.
Sounds like your mom and I would get along.
Yeah, she's pretty special. I'm real proud of her.
Well, but she's proud of you too, huh? Being a cop and all?
I hope so. I hope she knows how much I love her.
Oh, she knows. Moms always know how much their kids love them. Even if they don't tell them all the time, like they should.
Okay, moms always know. So a couple other quick movies that had brief mentions of ham radio in them from the 90s on. Let's see, we have The Royal Tannenbaums. If you watched it carefully, in the beginning of the movie there was a backstory about the family, and we learned that young Richie Tannenbaum's interests included tennis, drumming, cars, and ham radio, HAM with the Dots radio. Making Waves was a film that came out in 2004 in which ham radio enthusiasts exaggerate who they are on the air and then find out they have to live up to these personalities they created.
Just like you.
Yeah, exactly. And then 2012, which ironically came out in 2009, I don't know. Charlie Frost, played by Woody Harrelson, uses his radio show and other communications equipment, including an FT-736R transceiver, to spread the word about a world catastrophe coming. And this past spring, I don't know if you saw it, A Quiet Place. It was a science fiction horror film in which the Earth was invaded by blind creatures with hypersensitive hearing, and the protagonist, played by Jim Krasinski, actually had a ham radio station in the basement that he used to try to communicate to the outside world. Now we're going to go back to the small screen briefly before we move on to books. I enjoyed this clip. This is from the animated series The Dilbert Show. Dilbert's mother tells his pediatrician of her fears about young Dilbert.
I'm worried about little Dilbert. He's not like other kids.
What do you mean?
Yesterday, I left him alone for a minute, and he disassembled the TV, our clock, and the stereo.
That's perfectly normal. Kids take things apart.
The part that worries me is he used the components to build a ham radio set.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Then there was a Christmas time episode of Bob the Builder, a children's show that came out in 2001. And we discovered Bob uses his ham radio to communicate with his twin brother, Tom, to plan a Christmas visit.
I know that one,
Wendy, great news! Tom's coming for Christmas! Here, say something to him. Tom, this is Wendy, who I work with, remember?
Hello, Tom.
Hi, Wendy. Bob told me all about you. It'll be great to meet you all at last.
And Belcher, too.
All right, Pogo. I have to go now, Wendy. I have a hungry husky to feed.
Okay, Tom. I'll pass you back to Bob.
This is going to be the best Christmas ever, Tom.
I can't wait, Bob. See you all soon. Over and out.
Alrighty. Who remembers this episode from The Tonight Show from 2005? Jay Leno actually got some ham radio operators to send CW to raise texters. And you remember who won, right? Yeah. The CW ops clearly beat the world's fastest texters. And the message they sent was, I just saved a bunch of money on my car insurance, which is not as funny as it was in 2005, I guess. Just a couple more on the TV. There was a TV show called Jericho, I don't know if it was a fan, 2006 to 2008. There was a single ham radio in the town, a Yaesu FT101F, in the small town of Jericho, Kansas, and it was used by Rob Hopkins, played by Lenny James, to communicate with the outside world via CW. In an episode of The Office in 2010, Pam and Jim discovered that Dwight knows Morse code. In order to prank them, they learned Morse code and send absurd messages back and forth just to drive Dwight crazy. And finally, in the TV front, Last Man Standing. You know I had to include this one. So this show was revived this year, and as you know, Mike Baxter, played by Tim Taylor, is KAOXTT, which stands for X Tim Taylor. He's a ham radio operator. And the show is highly influenced by ham radio. It's often featured in the story, and the ham radio set is actually an operating station. You can actually operate them as well. Several episodes have featured ham radio. Episode 217, The Fight, from 2013. His daughter Mandy discovers her dad's ham radio shack after her social media, her cell phone is taken away. And my last video clip is the episode Thanksgiving 309 from 2013, and this is great. Tim Allen gives a nice diatribe against the FCC in this clip.
Calm down, let's do your little report. What am I thankful for? I'm thankful for radio, specifically ham radio. Ham radio is heavily regulated by the FCC, the same people who censor network television but not cable, so drug dealers and murderers become our heroes. They not only censor, but they regulate my ham radio. They require me to have a license, test. If they don't like what I have to say, they can fine me or lock me up. A great way to treat the last line of communication during the coming apocalypse. Why does the government choose to regulate free speech and ham radio, but anybody can operate, I don't know, a hemp outlet? So this Thanksgiving, while the rest of you are enjoying your turkey, I'm savoring my ham. Happy Thanksgiving, FCC, because I know you're listening.
We all know hymns like that. We may be hymns like that. So you may be aware that I mentioned they operate their own Last Man Standing Amateur Radio Club, KA6LMS. They actually can work the station. If you send them a card, they actually post QSL cards into the station. Has anybody worked KA6LMS in here? Have you tried it? They publish a sched when they're going to be on the air, so it's just something to try. Anyway, moving on. The next part, which is a lot shorter, ham radio and print. So ham radio has been featured in print as well, both novels and comic books over the years. Now, I've discovered these books myself at flea markets. They are Radio Boys books. Has anybody read any of these books? Ed has, of course. Ed probably grew up on these books, right? So, these were novels published for children in the 1920s and 1930s featuring ham radio. What was interesting was I discovered that they were published by 3 different publishing companies with 3 different authors, and there were several books in the 3 series. But they're really cool. They're about like young teenage boys who build radios and solve crimes and stuff like that, kind of like our Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. In 1963, The Incredible Hulk actually featured a ham radio in several episodes. Teenage ham radio operators formed by Rick Jones used the ham bands to relay the location of the Hulk. The group was known as the Teen Brigade. And in 1986, the ARRL published Archie's Ham Radio Adventure. Was anybody aware of this one?
Yeah. We have a copy.
We have a copy, that's great. Is it available for lending, or?
I don't think it's available for lending, but it is in the library.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, it's pretty cool actually. So it's literally the amateur radio community, ARRL, got with the publishers of Archie Comics and published a promotional comic book about ham radio. And then the ARRL has also published novels, mostly in the 80s and 90s, different writers, works of fiction. Titles included CQ Ghost Ship, DX Brings Disaster, Death Valley QTH. This all sounds so exciting. And the last slide, under print, takes us to Dilbert. We're gonna end with this comic strip, and so it's easier to read. Gilbert's with his girlfriend. If I left engineering and became a manager, would I be as sexy as I am now, Liz? She says, I think it would decrease your sex appeal by 17%, but that's just a planning number. Gilbert replies, what if I got my ham radio license to compensate for the loss? Look at my arm. Goosebumps. So that's most of the presentation. The last part is just a gallery of some celebrities who have ham radio licenses. This runs on its own, runs about 3 or 4 minutes. Enjoy. I hope people recognize this theme song. I know Ed Snyder probably does. Yes. Who knows it? K2ORS. There you go. Oops. Sorry about that. I think I have to back up. Somebody just sent me an email, I think. I apologize.
Thursday is
Stupid deal, just derailed my presentation.
You have to film and you put all the...
1 second. I'm going to restart on the slide.
Build them in the morning. So we're going to do...
Here we go.
You'll need a check.
There you go. The rigor of our theme song. W2 certified guitar player. You notice that's not a US call sign either.